The marketplace reeked of desperation. It clung to everything: the rusted awnings patched with tarp, the slush-black alleyways, the breath of the crowd packed shoulder to shoulder beneath weak heat lamps. The smell was sweat and cheap antiseptic, wet wool and old oil, bodies that had stopped believing a bath was worth the water. Captain Marcus Chun stood at the edge of it like a stone in a river, arms folded tight across his chest, jaw set hard enough to ache. His coat was Commonwealth issue old, tailored for a life he didn't have anymore, and it made him look like he belonged to a better world. He didn't. Not today. A hand thrust a flimsy slate under his nose. Sign. Marcus didn't even glance down at the scrolling text. He stared at the man holding it, corpulent, flushed, draped in a coat that was too warm for the season and too expensive for the street. 3 chins stacked above a collar ringed with sweat-dark stains. His eyes were bright and mean, like a predator that had learned to smile. "You're joking," Marcus said flatly. The slaver's smile widened. "I don't joke when money's involved, Captain. I'm not marrying anyone," Marcus snapped. "Especially not some alien slave you picked up from a garbage scow, the man Vex." According to his badge and the rumors that crawled through the market like rats, tilted his head, as though indulging a child. "It's not a request." Marcus felt his pulse thud in his throat. Somewhere beyond the press of bodies, beyond the barricades and the armored patrols, his ship sat on a landing pad like a grounded bird of prey, the Wanderer. 8 years of patched hull plating and stubborn survival. 8 years of being his home. 8 years, and now she was out of fuel. "You need supplies," Vex continued, voice oily with certainty. "Fuel, replacement couplers, oxygen filters, food that isn't nutrient paste. And you need it now." "My accounts are frozen," Marcus growled, though the words tasted like defeat. Vex made a little shooing motion with his free hand. Yes. Commonwealth Bank decided to get moral over that little incident on Proxima Station. Incident. Marcus echoed, heat flashing behind his eyes. He could still see it. The cramped service tunnels under Proxima's pleasure district. The locked cages. The terrified faces of kids who'd been missing for weeks. He'd gotten them out. He'd also leveled half the private security wing doing it. The bank didn't care about children. It cared about invoices. "Funny how heroism doesn't pay the docking fees," Vex said, and then leaned in, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. "This is the only way you're leaving this planet, Captain." Marcus's fingers flexed, itching to grab the slate and crack it in half. "Why does it have to be marriage?" Vex's grin sharpened. "Loophole in local law." He picked his teeth with a dirty nail, utterly unbothered by the grime of the marketplace. "Can't sell slaves off-world anymore. Too many inspections. Too many human rights committees pretending to care. But spouses?" He spread his hands. "Different story. You marry her. She becomes your legal dependent. And boom, you can take her wherever you want. I get my 5 credits. You get the governor's marriage registration bounty. Your ship gets fuel. And everyone wins, except the slave," Marcus muttered. "She's a Scarran," Vex said, as if that settled it. "They're difficult." Marcus had heard of Scarrans. Everyone had. An industrial species from the Scar system's brilliant engineers. meticulous shipwrights, and cursed with biology that made them easy to hate. Their pheromones hit most other species wrong, off-putting, headachy, some said nauseating. Some said the smell of them was like rot, which Marcus suspected was the real reason slavery had found them so easily. Vex sighed theatrically. Had her 3 months. Can't get rid of her. Off-world buyers don't want the scent on their ships. Local buyers don't want the trouble. You're doing me a favor. Marcus opened his mouth to argue again. A sharp whistle cut through the marketplace noise. The guards peeled away from the shadows like dogs on command. They dragged a figure forward by the arm. Marcus's first impression was silver hair, long, wild, matted with dirt. It fell across a face too sharp for softness, cheekbones bruised, lips split at one corner. Then he saw her skin, pale green, like new spring leaves under weak sunlight. She was thin to thin shoulders narrow beneath a threadbare wrap. Purple-yellow bruises blossomed along her arms and throat. But it was her eyes that hit him like a physical blow. Large, luminous, a startling violet that looked almost unreal in the grey light of the market. They weren't pleading. They weren't afraid. They were furious. The guards shoved her to her knees before him. She didn't flinch. She stared up at Marcus with hatred so pure it felt like heat. And then the smell reached him. Not the stench of rot Vex had implied. Not exactly. It was pungent. Yes, overripe fruit. Something medicinal and sharp. Like crushed herbs and antiseptic. Strong enough to make his nose prickle. Strong enough that a few nearby shoppers edged away. This, Vex announced with satisfaction, is The woman's gaze didn't move from Marcus. The air around her seemed to bristle. Scarran female. Vex went on, scrolling the slate with a thick thumb. 23 in Earth years. Healthy despite appearances. Totally legal. All papers in order. Ze spat at Marcus's boots. It wasn't a dramatic gesture. It was precise, controlled, a statement. She said something in a harsh, unfamiliar language syllables like stone striking stone. Marcus's brows knit. She doesn't speak common? She speaks it fine, Vex said with a shrug. Just chooses not to. Zea's eyes narrowed, as if she understood every word and despised them for existing. Vex held the slate out again. So, deal? Marcus stared at the contract until the letters blurred. Marriage. Dependent. Property disguised as paperwork. He looked past Vex, past the guards, through the grimy marketplace windows to the landing pad beyond. The Wanderer sat hunched under a dusting of early frost, her engines cold. Winter was coming to this planetarial winter. He'd heard the stories. When the frost arrived for good, the desperate and homeless didn't survive long. Neither did stranded captains with frozen accounts. Marcus swallowed, tasting bile. Fine, he said through clenched teeth. But I'm freeing her the moment we're off this rock. Vex's smile widened like a crack in ice. Sure you are, Captain. Sure you are. The ceremony happened in a government office that smelled of mold and burnt coffee. A bored clerk sat behind a scratched plexiglass barrier, eyes dull as she recited a script. A flag of the planetary authority drooped in a corner, faded from too much fluorescent light. The wall screen played a looped propaganda message about civic unity and marital prosperity. over images of happy couples who looked like they'd never missed a meal. Marcus stood stiffly at one side of a metal desk. Ze stood on the other, wrists bound in a way that pretended to be decorative. The clerk mumbled legal phrases neither of them acknowledged. Marcus signed where the slate told him to sign. Ze didn't. A guard pressed her thumb to a scanner instead. "Congratulations," the clerk said without looking up, as if she were announcing the weather. A machine word. A silver band clicked closed around Zia's wrist. Marcus's stomach turned. It looked like jewelry, sleek, polished, almost elegant, but he saw the faint seams and embedded lights. Tracking device. Leash disguised as a wedding gift. A fuel voucher slid from the printer. The clerk pushed it toward Marcus. The transaction was complete. Outside, Ze walked beside him without speaking. The guards fell away once they reached the landing pad. Vex's goods delivered. Marcus paused at the ramp to the Wanderer and turned to her. "Listen." Zia's violet eyes burned into his. Her scent flared sharp, medicinal, almost biting. "Don't," she said in common, voice rough from disuse, accent thick but intelligible. The single word held enough contempt to cut. Marcus's mouth snapped shut. He nodded once, tight, and led her aboard. He gave her the cabin. It was small, but it had a real bed, a door that locked, a heater that mostly worked. Marcus took the couch in the cockpit, where he could pretend he was only sleeping between shifts. Ze didn't go into the cabin. She settled in the cargo hold like a ghost that refused to be moved, wedging herself in a corner among crates of spare parts, knees drawn to her chest, eyes tracking him whenever he passed. The band on her wrist glinted in the dim light, a constant reminder. The first jump was rough. The Wanderer had been held together for years by Marcus's determination and the occasional miracle. He listened to the engines with the grim focus of a man listening for a heart murmur. He made it through the jump, but the ship shook on the far side, vibration thrumming through the hull. Ze didn't comment. Not until the third day. Marcus stood in the engine room with his hands on his hips, brow furrowed at the plasma injectors that refused to hold alignment. He'd tightened them twice. The vibration persisted, a nagging tremor through the port thruster. Behind him, soft footsteps. He turned. Ze stood in the doorway, hair tied back with a strip of cloth, face still bruised but cleaner now. Her eyes flicked over the engine core with unsettling quickness. "The injectors are misaligned," she said, not looking at him. "That's why you're getting vibration in port." Marcus blinked. "You know engineering." Zia's mouth twisted. "Scarran's built half the jump drives in this sector," she said coldly. "Before your people decided we were only good for labor camps and brothels." The words landed like a slap because they weren't exaggeration. Marcus had seen Scarran names on shipyard plates.